Welcome everyone to What's Your Story. I'm your host Emmanuel Mutui. Today we have a wonderful guest. Honestly, I'm grateful how the Lord is connecting me with all kinds of people, and I'm just genuinely happy that our today's guest could make it to the set and just gets to share his story because he's one of those dudes that 5, 10 years down the line you're gonna be like, yeah, I know that guy. He's like this big time record executive, whatever titles he'll have. I'm just grateful I got him now when he's not charging for these interviews. But without further ado, Andrew Friedrichs.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Emmanuel. That's very flattering.
Honestly, that's how things start. Because I know earlier we were talking about podcasts. I watched Lecrae's, I guess they did a podcast. I don't know if they're still doing it. And they were talking about how they started Rich Records like 20 years ago and whatever. And it was just humble beginnings. Just they had the record label and they'll pop up here, do shows, and they slowly grew to what they are now.
Yeah, love those kinds of stories. But not meaning to do a plug like this at the beginning of the podcast, but one of my favorite podcasts is called How I Built This, if you've heard it. It's all of these stories of businesses, and you get to hear like the humble beginnings. So you got to take the first step somehow, and the second and the third.
Yes, and you've definitely taken the first, and in the second and the third and the fourth, and one of these days you'll have a big record label producing all kinds of stuff, and it's gonna be amazing. And I'm just happy I met you at the beginning. Remember that. So we'll just start like we always do from the beginning. Where are you from?
I am from Syracuse, New York.
Okay. Wow.
Yep.
I never anticipated that answer.
Yeah, not one of those Colorado Springs natives.
Not at all.
Grew up there, spent 18 years of my life there, and then Rochester, New York for my undergrad, and then Miami, Florida for my graduate work, and then moved out to Colorado Springs.
Oh, nice. So when you were in Rochester, New York, Syracuse, New York, what did you want to be when you were?
Yeah, well, first, let's see. Depends on how far back you go. When I was probably 3 years old, I wanted to be a dinosaur.
Okay.
And then I became 4 years old and I realized that was not possible. I'm just joking. Let's see, I wanted to be an NBA basketball player when I was, pretty young.
Who was your favorite player?
Kobe.
Okay.
Kobe I still have a little bitty number 8 jersey.
Wow.
Kobe. Oh my gosh. I wore that to school like every day in the 4th grade. Yeah. Yeah. Too bad I could not shoot or dribble or pass or
unless your heart wanted something.
Yeah. And then I started to. So actually, one of my earliest goals was to be a professional trombone player. So trombone is my primary instrument.
Okay. How did that come about? Because you got Kobe, trombone.
Yeah, so my parents are both musicians.
Okay.
My dad is a professional orchestra clarinet player. Like that's his full-time thing. Plays in orchestras in New York. Is amazing. I wanted to follow in his footsteps and be a professional trombone player. Okay. And when I was in middle school and high school, that was pretty much all I did. I just practiced trombone.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
That was like my thing. Yeah.
What was it about trombone that just you wanted to play?
I don't know. I think it was a mix of it was a fun instrument. When you're young, you get to play loud. And I mean, I'm a little biased. I think it's a beautiful instrument. Okay. And then I was good at it when I was in middle school, and then when you're good at something, all your teachers are like, you should keep on doing it, and good job. You get a ton of validation, and then it's a cyclical thing, so sort of ego feeds practicing, which feeds the positive validation, and before I knew it, I was like, I want to be the best at trombone. And there was a lot of pride and ego in that feeling for me. But
speaking about the validation, was that something that attracted you into the instrument or music in general? Because your dad did this as a career.
Oh yeah.
Was that like, I need dad's validation in this choice?
Oh yeah. It was it was everyone's validation. And I don't think there was anything really unhealthy about like my parents giving me validation, but they all your teachers give you validation too, and you end up hanging out with a band crowd, and so it was something that that was my thing in high school. I went to college, studied trombone, and it wasn't until I actually in the music world, if you want to be a trombone player, in the for anyone who doesn't know, in the classical world, you take auditions for the jobs that you want. The auditions are sort of like the interview of classical music. And you go, and it's maybe like a nationwide thing, and there's a bunch of people who audition for one spot, and it's usually all blind. So you don't know who won until the very end. They step out from behind the curtain, and you're like, oh wow, this person won.
Oh wow!
So there was like one that I took for really like a dream job of mine, and it was when I was in grad school at Miami, Florida. And I auditioned for a job in Washington D.C. for one of the D.C. like premier army bands, and I won. And it was like, this is it, like I'm set for life. And I felt, as a Christian and as a believer in God, and believing that He had a plan for me, it just like made sense, and I was like, oh, this is His plan for me.
Wow.
But then I got medically disqualified. So in the process, you take the audition, and if you win, then they give you the job. They're like, here's the job, but it's conditional on joining this branch of military. So then you have to join the branch of military, you have to take the test, you have to take medical, and then you have to go to basic training, and then you get to play in these premier bands. So it was in the medical portion that I got disqualified. So I have psoriasis, and that precludes you from joining the Army. That happened to me in the Army and the Air Force, and so I was sort of crushed at the time, and it was a period of a lot of confusion for me, because it was, I really felt like that was where God was guiding me. Like all the pieces lined up, and only in years following that, it's just made more and more sense that at least I'm very grateful that God hasn't guided me in that path.
Really,
that He's
that's good.
Set my steps in a different direction.
That is good.
So that's a little thing, where trombone is led in my life. I still play trombone. I'm playing trombone in our church service this coming Sunday. Wow. So I still play it every now and then.
So you can make a career out of that?
Some people can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's dope. So let's go back. In your younger days, when you're in high school, I kind of want to know your character. What kind of guy were you? Were you, because hearing you talk now and the conversations we've had, you're very entrepreneurial. And that is kind of piquing my interest. Is that something that's later in life, or was that always there?
Yeah. That's something that I think was later in life.
Okay.
I don't really remember being very entrepreneurial when I was in high school. I mean, I was so consumed by practicing the trombone, very, and I think I had a lot of hard work and, work ethic, and, I was developing, in order to do something for a long time, you develop some perseverance.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't remember, I mean, when I was a little kid, I would always, get friends together from the neighborhood to play kickball games, but I don't think there was anything particularly entrepreneurial about that. It wasn't like making money or charging fees to play this kickball league in my backyard.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't think it wasn't until I got to college that I started trying to get people together, seeing, possibilities, like what could be, and I'm starting to have more entrepreneurial ideas.
And you wasn't driven with like the money factor. It was like, what can we create? Which is a big difference, which is good, because that means you're not going to screw people over. Like you're just in it for the art.
Yeah.
So in college, were you majoring in trombone? Is that a major?
I was majoring in trombone performance. Yeah.
Wow.
At a music school in Rochester called Eastman School of Music. But yeah, that was my major.
Okay.
Yep.
And so how long, was that a 4-year degree before Florida?
4-year degree.
And then
Then I went to Florida.
Is that another 4-year degree?
So I did a master's degree in trombone performance, and then a doctorate in trombone performance. So 5 more years at Miami
in trombone.
Yeah.
Dude, you blowing my mind. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah. Not many people realize that.
Huh.
But it's, the doctorate is like the terminal degree in music. And you usually get that if you want to teach trombone in some capacity, like at a university. And that was my goal for a long time.
Okay.
And I mean, I'd still be down to teach at a university.
Yeah.
But I think over time God has given me more of a passion for worship music.
Yeah.
And, really put trombone on the back burner.
So I'm trying to understand. We have a PhD in trombone. Like, what classes are you taking? It's like, what?
Yeah. Well, it's not a PhD. It's I don't want to, pretend like I'm like have a PhD. It's called a doctorate in musical arts. So there's a little bit of a difference, but you still write a big paper. And I wrote my big paper. So then really it's like 3 more years of school, but there's more freedom and there's more of an academic bent to it. And then you have a big academic assignment at the end. So I wrote this big paper at the end, but I decided to focus on entrepreneurship. So I wrote my paper about how to teach entrepreneurship if you're like a college teacher. Yeah. And you have to do a really specific area. My area was brass professors, but a lot of the principles can apply. I was just interested in entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Wow. I read a lot of things about entrepreneurship education, and that was fascinating. Yeah. But it was really like 3 more years of, and I loved it. I mean, it was so much fun. Like there were cool classes, like more of an academic bent. The paper actually was pretty fun. Yeah. But after a certain period of time for me, it was like, okay, I'm reading a lot about entrepreneurship. I need to just do it.
Right. You can't read about it, just gotta do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So after the doctorate is done, what did you want to do? Did you want to go to teaching at this point, or what is the next step?
Yeah, well, I was probably more confused about what I wanted to do after I graduated from my doctorate than I was when I started my undergrad. So during those 9 years, I became a Christian in undergrad. Started to have more of a passion for worship music things. Okay. Didn't know how that would fit into trombone. Still wanted to do trombone. And then when I graduated with my doctorate, I was like, oh, I love this academic thing. I want to do something academic. This is really fun. But I didn't know how all of these things would fit together. Yeah. And I auditioned for the band here. The military band, the Air Force Academy band, and I did win a position on trombone, but again, I got medically disqualified. Yeah. So around that time, and I think it was really just a span of a couple weeks, I found out that I got medically disqualified, got the call, you didn't get into the Air Force, for the medical waiver didn't get approved. Then a couple weeks later, I found out that the worship director at the church that we were going to, we've been going to a church for 6 years. I found out that the worship director at the church we'd been going to retired. And it was a little bit of a surprising thing. Nothing bad or anything. I think he was just tired. Got tired a year or two early. Yeah. And he was like, I got to be done, got to retire. Wow. So they were like, we're not ready for this. We're not ready to have a national search for a worship director. Yeah. We need someone to just stand up there, be like a mannequin on the platform, and then we'll hire anybody. Yeah. So I applied to the position, and I had 0 worship directing experience. Wow. They're looking for someone who could conduct a choir. I literally had never conducted a choir in my life. Wow. And all I did, I went into the interview, and they're like, well, you're overqualified in trombone and music. And you're really underqualified in worship. But we'll hire you. Perfect. And I just had a passion for worship. I really had a passion to see people come into the presence of God and sing for joy. And
that is cool. So before we proceed with the story there, are you married at this point?
I am, yes. Yeah, I have a wife. Her name is Nina Friedrichs. Yeah. We love her very much, and we've been married for 6 years.
Would you meet, you met probably undergrad, would that be?
We met actually in high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we met at like and this sounds super nerdy, but we met at this like music orchestra camp. So it was in New York, and it was like with the Philadelphia Orchestra, like their summer home. They came up, and like it was, I don't know, like 4 weeks or so. You go basically band camp, right? I mean,
Wow.
it was orchestra camp, and we both did that the summer before our senior years of high school. We went to separate high schools. We decided to start dating. We started dating at that summer thing, but then we broke up halfway through senior year, and we went to the same undergrad for 4 years.
Or not?
It wasn't on purpose for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I decided first, and then it felt like she followed me when she had broken up with me before.
Oh.
And there's really no hard feelings at all.
Yeah.
We've talked about this many times, joked about this, and it's just so...
story.
But but we went to undergrad for 4 years, and I mean, we became probably closer friends towards the end, but we never dated during those 4 years.
Did y'all date other people, or you just...
Yeah, here and there. I mean, it wasn't like we were trying to not date each other. But we graduated from undergrad, and then it was 2 years later. And during our undergrad, we both had become Christians, which sort of on separate, independent paths.
What is your journey? Cool. How did you become a Christian?
Yeah, well, I had started out undergrad pledging a fraternity.
Okay.
And that was like my starting group of people.
Yeah.
And, it was... I don't know, sort of an unhealthy thing and a whole, slew of factors. And after maybe a couple months or so, the fraternity got disbanded for hazing. Oh, and this old music school, this fraternity had been around for probably 100 years. Wow. And like the year that I started, like they got disbanded for hazing. So it was surprising that something that was, I mean, that's just, no need to get into that. Yeah. But so around that same time, there was someone who he was an older trombone player, and I mean, I was this young trombone player. Trombone was my life. If you were good at trombone, which many kids at this school were, I just like was in awe of these people. And this older trombone player invited me to a Bible study, and probably, I don't know, maybe I wanted to like not disappoint him or whatever, but I came to the Bible study, and I just had this feeling for the first time in my life with maybe 4 or 5 other guys. We were sitting at this table, and our Bibles were open, and I'd never had this feeling before. We opened up the Bibles, and it was like this light, shine into my heart. And I was very, I don't know, felt like there was a lot of darkness in my heart at that point in time. A lot of guilt, a lot of, loneliness. And it was this, starkest disparity of emotions, and I was like, there's something here in the goodness of this book. And I didn't really know what it was. After that, he explained to me what the gospel message was. I was really thinking that I was good enough. The gospel message to me as a high schooler was, I'm gonna succeed. I'm gonna be good enough. As long as I'm better than kid A or kid B, I'll be fine. Yeah. And I felt that way until I got to college. Yeah. And then that just started to crumble away. And then the gospel message was, I'm as good as Jesus Christ because of the work that Jesus did on the cross. And that was something that I really, really needed to hear. And then after that, I mean, there were some amazing friends. I still keep in touch. I called one of my closest friends the other day. We chatted on the phone for a couple hours. One of my closest friends from undergrad from this, it was through this InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. So that's how I became a Christian. Wow. Nina had a very similar path. Yeah. But it was very independent of each other. I did not know what was going on in her life. She didn't know what was going on in my life. Then we graduated. And a couple of years after we graduated, we were both working the same summer job at this sort of Christian retreat center in New York. You know, again, they had this orchestra that was playing, is accompanying like all of their weeks of chapel and whatnot. And I was in Miami, Florida. She was in DC, and we just decided to start doing long distance dating. And it was amazing because both of us saw changes in the other person, because we remembered dating the other person before, you know, massive spiritual transformations in each other's lives. Wow. So it was pretty cool being married to someone who I know what she was like before she was a Christian. But there is, you know, so much grace for each of us in what Jesus did.
That's awesome. So let's come back now. You're a worship director at this church.
Right.
And you've never done it. Right. How was that experience?
Honestly, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, it was like getting thrown into the deep end and like, hey, figure out how to swim.
But it was maybe a life goal.
Yeah, it was fun. And I loved, like, I had to learn how to conduct a choir.
Oh, yeah?
Having never done that before. I had to learn how to, like, lead a contemporary group, having never done that before.
Nice.
And I had this idea, I wanted to combine everything together because we had never, you know, we had this contemporary group, we had this orchestra, we had, you know, had all these players of different, like, abilities. So I did this evening, we called it Hymns and Harmonies. And it were these old hymns, but arranged in fresh ways with this little like chamber orchestra and a contemporary band. And so I really like, you know, hit the ground running, and I was really energized by the
challenge.
Yeah, by the challenge.
Yeah.
And that was really fun. And then that Christmas, like they do a big Christmas concert every year, and it was sort of like, well, you're doing it this year. You know, you have to conduct these like Handel Messiah numbers and like an orchestra and choir, and I mean, again, it was fun. It was just fun to like learn while you're doing it.
Yeah,
and,
which is for a person like you, that's probably exhilarating. So how long did you do that?
I did that for 1.5 years, and then they had a nationwide search. They hired someone who I now work with. His name is Greg Hill.
Okay.
A phenomenal guy. He's had like 30 years of experience in the directing worship at different churches, and he started, and we became friends, and he wanted, you know, to work with me.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So now what I do there is more on the artistic side of things.
Okay.
So I focus more on doing arrangements for the different ensembles, you know, the songwriting, or
nice.
Just how can we, because we have like over 100 people in the worship ministry, like volunteers. So there's a lot of talent, but from a lot of different backgrounds. So it's like, okay, this person plays guitar. This person plays violin, this person plays flute, this person plays banjo, you know? How do we get all of them to like lead worship on a Sunday? And, you know, when we can do that with artistry, that ends up being pretty cool. And I think something that makes Village 7 unique in a lot of ways.
That is cool.
So,
is that still your main job?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I work 30 hours a week there. I do some other things on the side, including Tapestry. Yeah. So I didn't want, when I started that job, I didn't want it to be a full-time thing, because I knew that I wanted something. I hadn't started Tapestry yet, but I knew that it was sort of in the works, and I wanted to have some free time for that.
So let's go into Tapestry. Because everything God gives us, He gives us a seed first. And kind of like the parable of the talents, some people take that seed and do something with it. Some people go and bury it. How did the idea come?
Oh, yeah. So I would have to go back to undergrad.
Okay.
So when I became a Christian, I was a freshman, and it wasn't until my junior or senior year, I think it was the end of my junior year, we were at this leadership sort of retreat with our InterVarsity chapter. And I remember there were it was a bunch of InterVarsity chapters from all around the Northeast, and everyone was getting together and worshiping. And there are these people who, all these college students who were just hungry for, for Jesus, for worship, for the joy and worship. And it was so evident in the times of worship that we had. Yeah. I mean, I remember Revelation Song was big at that time, and we did Revelation Song like 10 times during the course of those like 4 or 5 days. I mean, it was like, but no one got tired of Revelation Song. Yeah. It was like every time we did it, it just, people worshipped even harder, Wow. And then one time, we were supposed to go back and spend time with our chapter alone and sort of discuss something. But we felt like we wanted to keep on worshiping to Revelation Song. It was like, you'd think that Revelation Song would get old. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it was like maybe 20 of us in a room. There was a guy playing guitar, and like, I'd never experienced this before, but there were like, we were like bowing, like literally bowing down on the floor. Because we were so, I don't know. I mean, and that was probably the most joy that my heart has ever felt, especially up until that point in time. And it was like you would think that someone bowing on the floor is, not joyful. Yeah. But my heart was just getting flooded with joy. Yeah. And, it was like that verse in Psalm 16, like, in your presence there is fullness of joy. That was so true for us in that moment. And I was like, man, worship is good because God is good, and you get to experience God in worship. And everything should be worship. Everything that we do should be worship. Yeah. But, when you read the Bible, that should be worship. When you go out and talk to somebody else, that should be worship. But when we're singing, that's this special opportunity that God gives us. Yeah. And I was like, I want to devote I've been spending a lot of time working on music. I want to devote my musical expertise to this. And I didn't really know how, but I would say that was when the seed first was planted for me. After that, I had a series of ideas. I was like, well, I want to start this, or I want to start that. And one of them was, I remember standing there in our InterVarsity chapter, and we were all singing, and it was like, it was a music school, right? So there was a cello player over here, and there's a trumpet player over here, and a drum set player over here, and I was like, man, what if all of these students were using the thing that they're practicing 5 hours a day? Like they're in the practice rooms 5 hours a day, and then they're singing, which is biblical to sing, to use your voice to sing, but what if they were using the things that they're spending the most time on to worship God together? So I decided to get everyone together and do these like worship, we just worship with our primary instrument once a week. And then we would do these worship nights out in Rochester, New York, and that was probably the first thing where I was like, I sort of saw a vision for something, and an opportunity or whatever, and I acted on it with a friend, and it was like, this is really cool when that happens. Yeah. And that lit a fire for something that was like, I want to start something in worship music, business related, entrepreneurial related. Just didn't really know exactly what that would be. Yeah. And over time, some different ideas. I remember going on a walk with my wife one time, and I was like, what if we did this festival in Colorado Springs, and each church, there would be different churches. They'd have a set, and then at the end, there would be a set where all of the churches would worship together, like different people from the different churches. So that was something I was working on for a while, until I sat down with somebody, and he's someone who I really, looked just brilliant guy, and he said, well, what is unique about this? And you should think about the first thing you do is this giant thing. You should think about what is the most unique thing about this? What is the heart of this? How can you boil it down to its most basic form and then iterate on that to grow. And if you find something to iterate on, it's going to be better by the 100th time.
Yes.
Instead, if you find one thing 1 year, do it. Waste all your resources and all your time. You're not going to have a second or third time to grow and to learn.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, can't really argue with that.
Yeah, very sound logic.
Mm-hmm. So then I started talking to people, picking their brains, and so many things of Tapestry. The idea of the live sessions, the idea of, there are a lot of ideas where I would hear someone talking and I say, well, that's brilliant right there. So I remember talking with someone and they're like, how did you think of the idea for Tapestry? And I was like, well, I didn't. It was other people's ideas. And, I'm a big believer that 100 people are smarter than one person.
Yes.
You talk to someone and they have a unique perspective on something that you can never have because of their unique background. Mm-hmm. Their brain, their background, their whole thing is different than yours. And so the more, and I don't want to ever get away from that. I think that's what, I'm really excited about the business model for Tapestry. Yeah. But it's something that came from talking with many different people, realizing this person had a brilliant idea, this person had a brilliant idea.
Put it together.
I should probably pay like 100 people royalties for Tapestry.
Yeah. So where did the name come from?
Let's see. So the name came from, I had written down, so I don't know if you're familiar with like the Working Genius. It's like this Patrick Lencioni, like different personality traits or different temperament traits, and you can use them. It's like one of those working personality types. But there's one of my Working Genius sort of temperament is invention. So I think of a lot of ideas and wonder. So I'm good at asking questions, thinking of ideas, sitting in a chair, and not doing anything. So that's my strength. So, but anyhow, so I wrote, and then my wife is good at everything else.
Okay. Here's the idea, wife.
Yeah.
And then she makes it more beautiful thing.
Exactly.
Wow. Good to know.
I had written all of these names on a note in my phone, like 20 or 30 names. And I remember we were sitting at this breakfast place in Denver on a Saturday morning date. It was called Syrup, by the way. You got to go. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But we were sitting there having pancakes, slowly getting like a pancake-induced coma. And I was like, what about this name? What about this name? What about this name? And she was like, nope, no, that's bad. Don't like that one. No. And then she was like, oh, that's good. Yeah, that's a good one. So the idea was that it was Tapestry.
Yeah.
And I think it was the first idea was tapestries, and it was for the worship festival. Okay. The idea from the worship festival was a sound from every church, representing different backgrounds in Colorado Springs.
Yeah,
bringing those different styles and voices together and that's still a huge part of Tapestry. Yeah, bringing the voices of the body of Christ together so that you can hear something unique in the sphere of worship music.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. Yeah. So you have the name, you have the idea, and you boil down from the festival to a specific to the heart of Tapestry. Yeah. So what was the next move? Because a lot of people, that's still a place where you can abandon the idea.
Right. Well, oh gosh. There were a lot of little steps. Yeah. And it's so hard to know. A lot of it just felt like, okay, I'm going to take one step and then another step. Yeah. And honestly, the very first step wasn't the festival. The very first step was a Bible study that I wanted to do with local Christian musicians. Okay. And I remember talking with a friend, his name is Eli, and I was like, someday I'd like to do whatever. It wasn't called Tapestry. Someday I want to do the worship business idea, whatever it's going to be. And he was like, what would you need to do to start it today? It doesn't have to be the actual idea, but like something. What can you start today that you can do right now. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
well, I could get some different Christian musicians together for a Bible study. And that's what I did one summer. I remember our first kid was born that summer, and like, my wife and I still, she still wanted to do the Bible study.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
like we even brought our newborn to the Bible study
Okay.
one evening, and we just sort of bounced around to some different parks.
Mm-hmm.
Some different people came each time. We
Yeah.
just looked at some passages in the Bible that were about worship.
Yeah.
That's where I met Peter.
Okay.
Peter Schmidt.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was over, and it was like, okay, we did the first step happened. I would
Yeah.
say that was the first step.
Okay.
And then the second step was, starting to get some people together for this worship festival idea, and then pivoting to Tapestry as it is right now, which
Yeah.
is a curated platform of worship music from a variety of different backgrounds
Okay.
and musical styles that is all threaded together by a consistent commitment to the Word of God.
Okay.
Essentially, to boil the mission of Tapestry down into one really concise sentence would be
Yeah.
to say it's better worship music for the next generation of believers.
Good.
So we've defined that by
Yeah.
saying, what do we think better worship music is?
Yeah.
We feel like it needs to be more
Yeah.
musically diverse, creative,
Mm-hmm.
pioneering, forward-thinking, but also a commitment to the old truths of
Mm-hmm.
the faith.
Yeah, which is dope, like, because right now, for the four artists that you have, Peter kind of like has a similar background as you, is a musical composer, film guy. Aaron is gospel, worship, I don't know how to get,
Yeah.
big voice
Oh, yeah.
kind of guy. And then Corey, rap.
Yeah.
And then you have, I forget the
Jonathan Puckett.
Jonathan is more like a indie
Like indie, yeah.
kind of, so he's
Uh-huh.
very diverse.
Yeah.
And that you could because whenever I think about Tapestry, I'm thinking about like a woven kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see like the different people that you have right now, very different. And at least I know two of the four very word focused.
Mm.
I mean, I lived with one of them, so I know very well. Like, it's very word focused, which is dope. I'm excited to see what God is gonna do. So my next question, and it's kind of as we come here to an end. I know the vision is the festival, but you guys have pivoted. How do you see now? How are you gonna get from where you are now to there? I mean, I know the vision is probably clear right now, but for the people who are like,
Right.
what is next?
Mhm.
How would you say?
Yeah. So I'd say now the festival is the strategy, not the vision.
Okay.
Yeah. So the vision is, there, and I would say some of those things are our strategy. The vision is to see, and this is our statement, the entire body of Christ, especially the next generation of believers,
Yeah.
worship God with music that A, they love, and B, is filled with the truth of the Bible.
Yeah.
So for me, what does that look like? What's an example of that? And I mean, one of the most gospel-saturated worship songs that at least we sing at my church is called "In Christ Alone"
Oh yeah.
by Keith and Kristen Getty. Like everyone knows that song.
Mhm.
Like the gospel is so woven into that song,
Mhm.
but it's not a hip hop song.
No.
It's not an EDM song. It's not an indie singer songwriter or whatever. It's not in the kind of music that I think is going to resonate with someone who's 18-year-old right now.
Yeah. True.
And it's still a beautiful song.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that there aren't, tons of 18-year-olds that are really worshiping God with it.
Mhm.
But what I want to see with Tapestry, the vision for Tapestry, is to see a rap song with the same, In Christ Alone, if it was a rap song, or In Christ Alone, if it was a gospel or R&B or EDM or indie song.
Mhm.
I want to, and like, how can we get closer to that with every single artist, with every single year?
Mhm.
That's the goal with Tapestry.
Yeah.
And, the festival isn't gone. I still want to do larger live worship settings that involve multiple artists, eventually leading to something like a festival. You know, and I'd love to do a festival, you know, X number of years down the road. But I think it would have more of an identity now. You know, it would revolve more around a mission and a vision. Rather than like, hey, let's do a festival, you know, one off. See you later.
Cool, nice. There we go. Because I like the idea and I like the advice that the guy gave, because that's always been my belief. Like, whatever that big event is, it's either going to push you forward or it's just going to slow you down. But if you already have a mission and you're building towards, when you do that big event, it's just putting a bigger magnifying glass on what you're already doing. And then you keep progressing, and then you do another big event. So there's already everybody knows this is what Andrew does. So all these side things that you do is just bringing more people into what you're doing, which is amazing. And that's why wise counsel is necessary. Because a lot of people will never make it without wise counsel. So as we come here to an end, I'll three quick fire questions, and then we'll wrap up. What is the funnest thing you've done since you started Tapestry?
Oh man,
you have to pick one.
The funnest thing that I've done.
And don't try to be nice. If it has nothing to do with your artist, don't. If it's one artist that you completely love over the other ones, just be honest.
Oh man. Well, I'll say, in recent memory, a couple days ago, this is pretty fun.
Yeah.
I scoping out venues.
Okay.
With Corey Ard, the fourth artist this year. And I'm not going to tell you where the venue is, but I had to put on a hard hat.
Oh, yeah?
To walk through the venue.
Oh.
So that was pretty
That's
cool.
what he's live recording?
Maybe.
Wow, okay. That's dope.
But I'd say, like, whenever I get to experience the product, I mean, standing there worshiping in Aaron's session and Jonathan's session, you know, just taking it in, I'm like, it is so great to just worship with worship music that feels fresh. That isn't the same song that I've sung 1,000 times, but it's a new song, and it's the, you know, Christ is in this. You know, the you know, words of the Bible are in this song, and you know, that is, whenever I get to experience the product of Tapestry, it's really fun.
Yeah, you never changed. Oh my goodness! And then my wife and I were just listening to Mercy. Man. I was telling her, this is probably the two best songs I've heard from Aaron. And they were, well done songs. All right, so what is then the worst?
That's the worst. That's a good question. That's a tough question. I mean, right now, everything feels interesting. And I would say, you know, there's disappointments all the time. You know, those can be rough. You know, if you find out that, you know, something isn't going to work somehow, but that's part of the thing. Yeah. You know, like when I was trying to start that Bible study, like the very first step, I found out that, like, people couldn't come to the Bible study, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
You know, like, asking all these people and no one can make it.
Right.
And then Nina reminded me, she was like, this is going to happen a lot.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, just the disappointments. There's, you know, it's just something I wouldn't say I'm used to it now. I'm like, well, another disappointment. I'm fine. Yeah. You know, it's like, oh, it's still disappointing.
Yeah. I get that.
So, you know, whenever something doesn't really work out according to your plan, and it's also just a reminder that it's your plan. You're not God.
Yeah.
So.
True. Very true. So the last question, how do you escape?
How do I escape?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good question. I would say right now I probably escape in, like, you know, jury is out if this is healthy or not, but it's football season, and I'm in a couple different fantasy football leagues, and I know, like, you know, more than all my friends about football right now.
Oh, yeah.
So, but I, you know, talk about podcasts. I listen to a lot of fantasy football podcasts.
Okay.
You know, like now during this season, if I'm driving somewhere, I'll just turn on a fantasy football podcast. So, you know, whereas, and this is probably, you know, whereas before it was a Tim Keller podcast, now it's a fantasy football podcast. So I'm probably,
Yeah.
probably need to get more of the Tim Keller podcast.
Totally.
But yeah, that's probably how I see it right
That's
now.
awesome. Thank you, bro. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This
Thank you.
was great. This was great. Wow. Thank you all of you for listening to this interview. I pray and hope that his story just has inspired you to start something, to continue something, and never to give up on your dreams. So, remember, we all have a story. What's your story? Goodbye.